We are now in Lecture 2, Part 3 on Ingram's Law. Here we're going to discuss Ingram's own criticism of Hart and positivism, which amounts to saying that there's the moral core of law and that there is no single idea of that core. We're also going to look at Hegel's criticism of positivism, that it ignores freedom as the fundamental human concern and the fundamental human good on which law is based. Dworkin and the working out of that moral core of law through history and interpretation by the judicial branch in the government will be yet another thing we'll look at in this part 3. Ingram claims that there's a moral core in law. We saw evidence for this in his discussion of Dworkin's reflection and that abolition of segregation by law has a moral dimension to it and is not simply a means to preserving peace and order in society. In that sense, we are morally obligated and not simply coerced or find it advantageous to follow the law. But that moral core is hard to reduce to a single idea or principle, according to Ingram, especially if that moral core itself continues to evolve and develop historically, as Dworkin and Hegel claim. For this reason, Ingram argues that relationship between morality and law must be thought of as indirect. Hegel supports Ingram's argument, contra positivists, that there is a moral core to law, freedom as a value in its own right, and not simply as a means to stability, is a key aspect of that moral core. As living subjects, we value freedom, but that freedom needs to be protected, and perhaps more than just protected, or in other words, made real by law. Morals require law, just as law requires morals in order for law to really be law. This is Hegel's point. Ingram also gets from Hegel that freedom must by definition be open-ended, and so it cannot really be articulated in a single way or idea on which law can be based. And thus, again, the law's relation to morality must be indirect, since morality itself is not something fixed, or in that sense, direct. As we saw in Dworkin's take on the history of the 14th Amendment, he claims that it is right for judges to interpret the law to make it more consistent with the moral core of law, that is, respect for dignity and autonomy of rational individuals. So much so that original laws and intentions of lawmakers can be rejected to make the law more consistent with the moral core. With Dworkin, as with Hegel, there's an emphasis on the ongoing process of the articulation of the law and the moral core of the law itself on which the law is based.